was born blue, not breathing, and for a moment, everyone thought he wouldn't make it. But the baby gasped, cried, and the world unknowingly welcomed a voice that would one day silence entire rooms. This is not just the story of Frank Sinatra. This is the story of a boy who should have died the moment he was born, but instead, he was destined to sing forever. The year was 1915. Hoboken, New Jersey, a town wrapped in fog, filled with the smell of the docks, and echoing with the heavy footsteps of immigrant workers. In a cramped apartment above a bar, Frank Sinatra came into the world. His father, Marty, was a former boxer, rough around the edges but disciplined. His mother, Dolly, was fierce, ambitious, and unafraid to bend the rules. Together, they gave life to a boy who seemed ordinary in every way, except for his voice. Hoboken was not kind to children like Frank. Italian immigrants were often mocked, pushed aside, and treated as second-class citizens. And Frank, he carried a mark, a scar on his cheek, a reminder of his difficult birth. Other kids laughed, called him names, and picked fights with him. Each insult carved deeper into his heart, but in that pain, something else was born. Hunger, a hunger to be heard. At night, Frank would walk near the docks, staring at the water and the stars above. Ships came and went, carrying dreams across the ocean. And somewhere deep inside, Frank believed he was meant to leave Hoboken behind, not as a worker, not as a fighter, but as something greater. It was Bing Crosby's voice on the radio that changed everything. The way Crosby held a note, the way he made silence feel alive. Frank studied it like scripture, and in the quiet of his room, he whispered to himself, "One day, they'll stop and listen to me too." But destiny doesn't arrive quietly. It arrives in defiance. One Christmas Eve, in a small family gathering, young Frank was asked to sing. Nervous, trembling, he opened his mouth and the room froze. That voice, clear, emotional, far too powerful for a child, poured into the air. The neighbors would talk about it for weeks. For the first time, Frank realized his way out of Hoboken was not through fists or fortune, but through his voice. Yet even as his gift revealed itself, the shadows of doubt whispered louder. "You're just a poor immigrant son. No one will ever care about your songs." That was the paradox of Frank Sinatra. From the very beginning, the world seemed determined to silence him, but his destiny was to sing louder. And so, in the forgotten streets of Hoboken, the legend of the voice began, not with fame, not with fortune, but with a boy who refused to stay silent. Imagine being a teenager with nothing but a scarred face, secondhand clothes, and a dream so big it feels almost laughable. He wasn't supposed to make out of Hoboken, and yet Frank Sinatra was about to step onto his first stage. What no one knew was that the world would never sound the same again. Frank was restless. Hoboken's narrow alleys, with their damp walls and shouting dock workers, were too small for the sound he carried inside. His classmates prepared for factory jobs, some for the Navy, others for lives identical to their fathers. But Frank couldn't picture himself in that mold. He had one gift, one weapon, his voice. As a teenager, he found refuge in music wherever he could. He would spend hours in smoky clubs, standing in the back, barely old enough to be inside, listening to bands swing through the night. The rhythm of jazz, the crooning of vocalists, the shimmer of brass instruments. It was like the whole world cracked open for him. And in those dim-lit clubs, Sinatra didn't just hear music. He saw a future. At first, it was just small gatherings, weddings, local bars, a borrowed microphone, a borrowed suit, a boy with more ambition than polish. His mother, Dolly, pushed him hard. She told everyone she knew that her Frankie would be someone. She believed it so fiercely that people began to wonder if maybe she was right. But confidence didn't come easy to Frank. Every time he stood in front of a crowd, he battled the storm inside. The scar on his cheek, the whispers of immigrant boy, the endless echo of "you're not good enough" played in his mind. And yet, the moment he opened his mouth, everything changed. When Frank sang, silence fell. Conversation stopped. Glasses froze midair. Even in small taverns, people turned their heads, not because they wanted to, but because they couldn't help it. His voice wasn't loud or dramatic. It was intimate, almost like a confession. He sang as if each note carried a secret meant only for you. And that intimacy became his weapon. One evening, at a local bar on Washington Street, Frank sang with a small band for the first time. He wore a suit too big for his frame, sleeves folded back, shoes scuffed from the streets. But the moment he sang Night and Day, the entire room shifted. An old bartender would later say, "It wasn't that the boy could sing. It was that when he sang, you felt he was singing only for you, like he knew your pain." The world was changing too. America was standing on the edge of the 1930s. Radio stations spreading music into every home. For the first time in history, a poor kid from Hoboken could dream of reaching millions with just a microphone. And Frank, though he didn't yet know how, believed that microphone would one day be his weapon against the silence of his childhood. But the road wasn't smooth. His first auditions went poorly. Band leaders dismissed him as skinny, untrained, just another dreamer. "Kid, you're no Crosby," one told him bluntly. And for weeks, Frank carried those words like stones in his chest. But rejection didn't crush him. It sharpened him. He began to practice obsessively. He studied not just notes, but breath. He would fill his lungs until they burned, learning how to hold phrases longer than anyone else. He stood in front of the mirror, teaching himself how to sing not to a crowd, but to one soul at a time. He even swam underwater, holding his breath, building the lung capacity that would one day become his signature. Every insult, every closed door, every night spent doubting himself, he turned into fuel. Sinatra was building something no one had seen before. Not just a singer, but a storyteller who could turn a song into a confession, a stage into a confession booth. And yet, in those early years, his dream was still fragile. One wrong turn, one more rejection, could have broken it forever. But destiny was patient. Soon, Frank Sinatra would find himself standing in front of the right microphone, in front of the right audience, and the boy from Hoboken would begin to disappear, because in his place, a legend was about to be born. One night, he was just another skinny kid singing in a smoky bar. The next, his name was spreading like wildfire across America. How does a boy from Hoboken go from being ignored to making entire stadiums scream his name? The truth is, Frank Sinatra didn't just rise. He exploded. The 1930s were a restless time in America. The Great Depression lingered in people's bones, but the radio brought escape. Music wasn't just entertainment. It was survival, a lifeline that carried people through hard nights. And in that world, voices mattered. A single voice could cut through static, could soothe, could ignite. For Frank, the turning point came with the Harry James Orchestra. In 1939, he got his first real break when James, a trumpeter with a rising band, took a chance on him. Frank was terrified at first. The stages were bigger, the musicians sharper, and the pressure immense. But when he stepped to the microphone, something happened. His voice filled the hall, softer and smoother than anyone expected. And suddenly the audience leaned in. It wasn't power. It wasn't volume. It was intimacy. Then came Tommy Dorsey. Sinatra's big leap. Dorsey's orchestra was one of the best in the country. And joining it was like stepping onto a rocket. Night after night, city after city, Frank refined his craft. He studied Dorsey's trombone playing, how he controlled his breath, how he shaped notes like silk. Frank practiced until his lungs burned, until he could hold a phrase longer than anyone in the business. By the time the spotlight found him, he was ready, and America noticed. Crowds began to swell. Radio programs lit up with his songs. And soon, something shocking happened. The screaming started. At first, it was just a handful of young women near the stage, clutching their hands to their chests. But night after night, the numbers grew. By the early 1940s, theaters were packed with thousands of fans, mostly young women, shrieking, fainting, clawing just to touch him. It was pandemonium. The press gave a name, Sinatra Mania. Frank wasn't just a singer anymore. He was a phenomenon. He wore perfectly tailored suits, his tie always loosened just enough to look effortless. His skinny frame, once mocked in Hoboken, now looked iconic under the spotlight. And that voice, that hypnotic, conversational, heartbreaking voice, turned into the first true pop idol of the modern era. But fame wasn't just applause. It was pressure. The FBI began keeping files on him. Newspapers questioned his morals, his politics, his friends. He was loved, hated, worshipped, and doubted all at once. Some called him the voice of a generation. Others whispered he was just another passing fad. Frank didn't care. On stage, when the lights dimmed and the microphone warmed in his hand, he felt invincible. The doubts of Hoboken, the scars of childhood, the insults of band leaders, all of it disappeared when he sang. And yet, even at the height of this meteoric rise, a storm was quietly forming. Fame, after all, is not a gift. It is a debt. And soon, Frank Sinatra would learn just how heavy the cost could be. He had the voice that made millions swoon, the charm that melted hearts, and the fame that every young dreamer longed for. But what the world didn't see was the cost, the headlines, the scandals, the loneliness hiding behind the spotlight. For Frank Sinatra, Hollywood wasn't just a dreamland. It was a battlefield. By the mid-1940s, Frank Sinatra was everywhere. His face smiled from magazines. His voice dominated the radio, and his concerts drew crowds so loud the music could barely be heard over the screaming. Hollywood came calling, and Frank answered. At first, it was musical films, light, cheerful roles where he could sing a tune and charm the camera. But Hollywood wanted more from him. Soon, he was cast in dramatic roles, and to everyone's surprise, he could act. Sinatra wasn't just a singer pretending. He had raw talent, intensity, vulnerability. He could look into a camera and make you believe every word, every heartbreak. But with fame came exposure. The newspapers adored him, and then they devoured him. Every love affair, every friendship, every late-night party became fodder for gossip. His marriage to Nancy Barbato, his childhood sweetheart, strained under the weight of constant headlines. His absences, his affairs, the endless temptations of Hollywood. Soon their private struggles became public humiliation, and the press was merciless. One day they crowned him the voice. The next, they called him washed up, arrogant, reckless. For every fan who screamed his name, there was a critic sharpening their pen. Yet Frank fed on the chaos. He was volatile, emotional, impulsive, and he didn't hide it. He fought with journalists. He clashed with directors. He gambled. He drank. He loved recklessly. To his fans, this rawness made him more human. To his enemies, it was weakness waiting to be exploited. The pressure built further when whispers of his friendship spread. Frank was seen with politicians, with gangsters, with men whose names carried shadows. Rumors of mafia ties haunted him. FBI files thickened on his desk. Was he just a singer? Or was he a man connected to something darker? On stage, the image was perfect. A suit pressed sharp, a glass in hand. His voice cutting through silence like velvet. But behind closed doors, Sinatra unraveled. Depression stalked him. In hotel rooms across America, he stared at the ceiling wondering if the fame, the money, the adoration meant anything at all. Hollywood had given him everything. Oscars, stardom, power. But it had also stolen something from him. Peace. And yet, Frank Sinatra wasn't done. Not even close. Because just when the world thought it had him figured out, Sinatra would fall harder than ever, only to rise again in a way no one could predict it. For years, he was untouchable, the golden boy of American music, the crooner who made women faint and men envy him. But fame is never free. Whispers began to follow him like shadows. Whispers of power, whispers of danger, whispers of the mafia. And soon, those whispers would nearly destroy Frank Sinatra. The rumors began quietly. At first, they were nothing more than murmurs in smoky lounges and late-night bars. Sinatra was seen shaking hands with men who never gave their names. He dined with politicians one night and sat with notorious figures the next. The FBI took notice. Reports filled dusty folders. Sinatra has connections. Watch him closely. But Frank never denied it. He wasn't a man who lived cautiously. He loved the thrill of being near power, the allure of forbidden circles. In Las Vegas, he performed at casinos run by men who weren't just businessmen. They were bosses. And Frank, whether by choice or by circumstance, was part of their world. The public didn't know the details, but they felt the shift. The charming boy from Hoboken was no longer just a singer. He was dangerous. The press turned on him. Headlines painted him as reckless, arrogant, entangled in scandals too dark for America's golden crooner. And then came the collapse. By the late 1940s, his voice began to falter. Years of smoking, drinking, and relentless touring stripped the silk from his sound. Crowds that once screamed now dwindled. Record sales plummeted. Concert halls grew empty. The same newspapers that once worshipped him now mocked him. Sinatra finished. The voices cracked. His marriage to Nancy, already strained, finally shattered. His children watched their father unravel, while the world gossiped about his affairs with Hollywood starlets. One of them, Ava Gardner, became the love and torment of his life. Their romance was electric, violent, destructive. They loved each other with fire and burned each other with the same flame. Professionally, Sinatra hit rock bottom. Columbia Records dropped him. Hollywood stopped calling. In Las Vegas, casinos debated whether he was worth the stage time. The boy who once commanded armies of screaming fans now struggled to fill a room. One night, alone in his dressing room, Frank stared at his reflection. His face, once adored on posters, now looked tired, lined, broken. He whispered to himself, "Maybe they were right. Maybe it's over." But something inside him refused to accept defeat. That Hoboken fire, the same hunger that had carried him from the docks to the world stage, still flickered. Sinatra knew one thing. He could not, would not, go quietly. He was down, but not done. And soon, through sheer will and one of the most remarkable comebacks in entertainment history, Frank Sinatra would rise again. He would prove not only to the world, but to himself, that the voice had not been silenced. Because legends don't fade. They fight their way back. He had been written off, abandoned by his record label, mocked by critics, and left behind by the very fans who once screamed his name. Frank Sinatra was finished, or so they thought. But legends don't disappear. They wait, they fight, and when they return louder than ever. The late 1940s had nearly buried him. His voice cracked on stage, his record stopped selling, and his personal life was an endless storm. His marriage to Nancy was gone. His fiery romance with Ava Gardner consumed him, a love so intoxicating it was almost poisonous. She was wild, unpredictable, and every bit as self-destructive as Frank. They broke glasses in restaurants, screamed in hotel hallways, and then collapsed into each other's arms. To the world, it was scandal. To Frank, it was survival. But even love couldn't save his career. By 1950, Sinatra was a ghost. Columbia Records cut him loose. Hollywood stopped returning calls. His concerts drew half-filled rooms, his paycheck shrinking with every show. Once he had been the voice of a generation. Now he was yesterday's news. The cruel headline screamed, Sinatra was not Sinatra is. For Frank, it was humiliation. For a man who had once made entire theaters tremble with his voice, silence was unbearable. He sank into depression, drinking heavily, his rage often exploding in violent bursts. Friends began to distance themselves. Even Ava, the love of his life, couldn't always stay. One night, after a particularly brutal fight, she left him bleeding, emotionally and physically. Frank fell to the floor, staring into the darkness, wondering if the world would be better off without him. He even tried to end it. A failed suicide attempt became the ultimate symbol of just how far the mighty had fallen. But Sinatra was not meant to die in shadows. In 1953, opportunity knocked, not with music, but with film. The movie was From Here to Eternity, a World War II drama. Sinatra wanted a role desperately. Private Angelo Maggio. The studio doubted him. Hollywood whispered, "He's finished. Why risk it?" But Frank was relentless. He begged, pleaded, and when the cameras finally rolled, he gave a performance no one expected. On screen, Sinatra wasn't a polished crooner anymore. He was raw, wounded, human. His portrayal of Maggio, a doomed soldier, was heartbreaking. He bled truth into every line, every gesture, every glance. It wasn't acting, it was confession. And then the impossible happened. The Academy Award, Best Supporting Actor. Frank Sinatra, the man who had been discarded, mocked, written off as a failure, walked onto the stage and held a golden statue in his hands. The audience roared. The critics who had buried him now praised him. The newspapers that once sneered wrote headlines of redemption. It was more than a victory. It was resurrection. The Oscar cracked open doors that had been bolted shut. Record companies came calling again. This time, Capitol Records took him in. And in the studio, Frank rediscovered his power. His voice, once thought broken, had returned deeper, richer, more emotional than ever. He was no longer just a crooner for teenage girls. He was an artist, capable of interpreting heartbreak, loneliness, and longing in ways no one else could. In 1955, he released In the Wee Small Hours, a collection of songs so intimate, so brutally honest, it was like stepping into Sinatra's soul. No longer was he the idol of screaming teenagers. Now, he was a poet of broken hearts, the singer for lonely men at 2 a.m. staring at their whiskey glasses. Critics hailed it as one of the greatest albums ever made. The comeback was complete, but more than that, it was a transformation. Sinatra had died as a pop idol and been reborn as a legend. From the smoky bars of Hoboken, through the humiliation of failure, to the blinding lights of Hollywood's greatest stage, Frank Sinatra had proven something to the world and to himself. Legends may stumble, but they never truly fall. And yet, his story was far from over. Because now, with Las Vegas calling and the Rat Pack waiting in the wings, Sinatra was about to create an empire of cool that would define an entire era. They called him finished. Then he won an Oscar. They called him lucky. Then he reinvented music. And when the world thought they had finally figured out Frank Sinatra, he built an empire in the desert. Las Vegas wasn't just neon lights and blackjack tables. It became his kingdom. And Sinatra, he became its king. By the mid-1950s, Frank Sinatra was no longer just a singer, no longer just a movie star. He was a force of nature. Capitol Records had given him a new home, and his voice, deeper and more seasoned than ever, now carried a weight it never had before. His album songs for swinging lovers. And Only the Lonely weren't just records, they were emotional landscapes. Critics hailed him as the greatest interpreter of song in American history. The man who once sang for screaming teenagers was now singing for the soul of America itself. But while the record sold, something bigger was happening in Las Vegas. Sinatra fell in love with the desert city, its neon glow, its endless nights, its promise of reinvention. And in Vegas, he wasn't just a performer, he was a performer. When Sinatra walked onto a stage at the Sands Hotel, cigarette in hand, drink on the piano, the crowd didn't just cheer, they worshipped. His presence was electric, his confidence untouchable. He wasn't begging for applause anymore. He commanded it. And then came the Rat Pack. Dean Martin, Sammy Davis Jr. Peter Lawford, Joey Bishop. Together with Sinatra, they were more than entertainers. They were the definition of cool. Their shows weren't polished productions. They were spontaneous chaos. Jokes, songs, pranks, whiskey-fueled laughter. It felt less like a concert and more like being invited into the wildest party in the world. America was mesmerized. The Rat Pack embodied rebellion wrapped in tuxedos. They smoked on stage. They insulted each other mid-performance. They blurred the line between celebrity and gangster. And Sinatra was the leader, the chairman of the board. Vegas flourished under their reign. Crowds flooded the casinos just to catch a glimpse of Sinatra and his crew. Politicians, movie stars, mob bosses. They all want a seat in the room when Frank sang My Way at 2 a.m. The desert city became his playground. And for a time, it felt like Sinatra owned it. But Vegas wasn't just glitz and glamour. It was shadow and smoke. Behind the laughter, the friendships, the whiskey glasses. There were darker truths. Sinatra's connections to powerful men, some in politics, others in organized crime, deepened. Rumors turned into stories, stories into files, files into investigations. The FBI kept watching, writing, waiting. Sinatra didn't care. Or at least, he pretended not to. On stage, he was untouchable, with Dean to his right and Sammy to his left. He ruled a room like a king in a crownless empire. The Rat Pack wasn't just entertainment. It was dominance. For America, the Rat Pack represented freedom. Freedom to laugh, to drink, to gamble, to forget about the Cold War, about fear, about conformity. And Sinatra, the boy from Hoboken who once dreamed by the docks, now stood in the center of it all, the living, breathing symbol of swagger, success, and survival. But the empire of cool could not last forever. Vegas was a kingdom built on shifting sand. And as Sinatra aged, as the world changed around him, the neon glow began to flicker. The legend wasn't fading yet, but the battles were coming. Battles with age, battles with the press, battles with his own mortality. For now, though, Frank Sinatra was at the top of the world. The legend's last song. Every legend has a final note. Every king must leave his throne. For Frank Sinatra, the man who sang America through wars, heartbreaks, and decades of change, the time had come to face the one stage he could not command forever, the stage of time. The 1970s and 80s were a new world. Rock and roll ruled the charts. Young stars captured headlines. But Sinatra, even in his 60s, refused to step aside. He toured relentlessly, his voice weathered but still commanding. Fans who had grown old with him filled arenas, bringing their children, even their grandchildren, to witness the voice. Each performance carried more weight now. The once effortless phrasing was harder to maintain, but the emotion ran deeper. When Sinatra sang, "It was a very good year," or "My Way," it wasn't just entertainment anymore. It was testimony. It was a man looking back at a life that had burned bright, burned hard, and refused to be forgotten. He was honored everywhere. Grammys, a Presidential Medal of Freedom, Kennedy Center Awards. Presidents sought his presence. World leaders courted his friendship. He was no longer just a singer. He was living history, an embodiment of America's voice through the 20th century. But behind the applause, Sinatra battled time. His body betrayed him. Health problems mounted. His memory faltered. And yet, he would not stop. In 1994, at age 78, he gave one of his last concerts. His voice cracked, his timing slipped. But when he sang "My Way," the audience wept. They weren't hearing perfection anymore. They were hearing the end of an era. 2 years later, the lights finally dimmed. On May 14, 1998, Frank Sinatra, the boy from Hoboken, the crooner, the actor, the scandal, the legend, passed away in Los Angeles at the age of 82. The world mourned. Las Vegas dimmed its lights in his honor. Radio stations played his songs nonstop. Even the mafia, even the FBI, even presidents paused to remember him. Sinatra had sung his last note. But here's the truth. Legends don't die. Sinatra's voice still plays in elevators, in restaurants, in lonely bedrooms at 2 a.m. His story of failure, redemption, chaos, and triumph continues to echo because Sinatra didn't just sing songs. He sang lives. He sang ours. And when the final curtain fell, America whispered back the words he had given him for decades. "I did it my way." Asterisk, Frank Sinatra's story is not just about music. It's about resilience. It's about falling and rising, about fighting shadows and chasing light, about a boy from Hoboken who refused to stay silent. He showed us that even when the world turns its back on you, there's always a way back, if you have the courage to keep singing your song. And maybe that's why, even now, his voice still lingers. In the quiet of the night, in the glow of city lights, Sinatra reminds us, legends don't die, they echo. If his journey moved you, if his fight, his triumphs, and his scars spoke to you, then stay with us. This channel is where silent stories find a voice again, where forgotten truths are remembered. subscribe, join our community, and keep walking with us through the lives of those who shaped history. Because the curtain may fall, but the story never ends. Asterisk.